All right, today we're doing something a little different. We're not just going to talk about what an AI can do, we're going to look at how it does it. We're actually going under the hood to see how you would build an AI investment analyst, from the ground up.
So, let's just kick things off with a huge question. Think about it. As an investor, how on earth do you find the best strategy? I mean, you could test a few, right? Maybe a dozen if you're really dedicated. But what if? What if you could test over 30,000 different strategies all at the same time? Can you even imagine the kinds of insights that would give you?
Well, that's exactly the challenge we're going to tackle. We're walking through the blueprint for an AI system that's designed to do just that. The whole goal here is to build an artificial intelligence that can basically think like a top-tier quantitative analyst, but at a scale that no human being could ever possibly match.
So what is this thing, really? At its heart, the system we're looking at is a giant simulation engine. Its job is to create this massive universe of, hypothetical ETF portfolios. It runs them through all sorts of different market conditions, and then, this is the key part, it learns from all those results to figure out which combinations are most likely to win.
Okay, so every great recipe needs the right ingredients, right? For an AI, that ingredient is always data. But here's where this gets really clever. Instead of just feeding it old historical data, this system actually creates its own massive data set. It literally builds a what-if universe for itself to learn from.
If you only use past data, it's kind of like trying to drive a car while only looking in the rearview mirror. It tells you where you've been, but not where you're going. This system, it takes a totally different approach. It's not just asking what happened in the past. It runs simulations for tens of thousands of potential scenarios to ask what could happen. This lets it find strategies that are way more robust.
And the scale here, it's just mind-boggling. When you systematically combine every single parameter you can think of, like how many ETFs are in the portfolio, how long you hold them, your risk tolerance, the system spits out a staggering 31,500 unique strategies. It's really a brute force attack on finding out what actually works.
So how does it do it? It basically boils down to 4 simple steps. For every single one of those 30,000 plus strategies, the system first grabs a bunch of ETFs. Then, it assigns them different weights. Third, it runs a backtest to see how that portfolio would have done. And then, and this is the crazy part, it does that whole thing again 10,000 times. That, right there, is how you build a proper what-if universe.
All right, so our ingredients are prepped. We've got this gigantic data set of simulated portfolios. Now it's time for the actual recipe. This is maybe the most important step, teaching the machine how to spot a winning strategy in all that chaos.
The training process itself is super methodical. First, it loads up all 10,000 of those simulations. Then, it does something called encoding features, which is just a fancy way of saying it turns ideas like high risk into numbers the computer can understand. After that comes the main event. It trains 5 separate, specialized models using something called XGBoost. It's this really powerful algorithm that's great at finding subtle patterns.
So what is the AI actually learning to predict here? It's not just about how much money did it make. No, it's way smarter than that. It learns to forecast the compound annual growth rate, CAGR. It predicts the Sharpe ratio, which is a super important metric for measuring return compared to the risk you took. It even estimates the max drawdown, basically the worst case loss you could expect. It's learning to look at a portfolio from all the important angles, just like a really experienced analyst would. Okay, so the AI is trained, it's ready to go. It can now look at some potential strategy and give a pretty good prediction of how it'll do. But how does it use that superpower to find the best individual ETFs? Well, that brings us to the analysis phase.
And this part is honestly really smart. Instead of just looking at how an ETF performed all by itself, the system judges it based on how often it's a key player in a winning portfolio. It's asking questions like, how often did we even include this ETF? Or, more importantly, how often did it show up in a portfolio that we'd actually recommend?
And let me tell you, this system is a tough grader. Out of a single run of 10,000 portfolios, only around 7,800 even got the recommended stamp of approval. This filtering step is absolutely crucial. It's how the AI sifts through all the junk to focus on just the strategies that have real potential.
That phrase we mentioned earlier, Pareto efficient, is super important here. The easiest way to think about it is the perfect balance point. A Pareto efficient portfolio is one where you literally can't get a higher return without also taking on more risk. You can't make one thing better without making something else worse. These are the absolute gold standard portfolios that the whole system is trying to hunt down. Okay, so we've seen how the data gets made, how the AI gets trained, and how it analyzes everything. So now, it's the moment of truth. What did the AI actually find? What's the final verdict? All right, let's be totally transparent about how well this thing actually works. That R-squared value, basically it tells you how much of a strategy's performance the model can actually explain. A perfect score of 1 would mean it's a crystal ball, and, well, you can see we're not quite there, especially with something as tricky as the Sharpe ratio. But, and this is a big but, the results for CAGR and the overall risk score show that the AI really can find the signal in the noise. It has a real positive predictive ability.
And that really brings us to the most important point of all of this. The goal of a system like this is not to perfectly predict the future. I mean, that's impossible, right? The real goal is to use the massive scale of computing to systematically find strategies that just have a proven statistical edge over the long haul.
And here it is, the payoff. After all that work, sifting through thousands upon thousands of simulations, this is the AI's current leaderboard. That composite score ranks each ETF based on everything we just talked about.
So that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. We just walked through a system that can do the work of 1,000 human analysts in just a few hours. So if an AI can analyze 30,000 strategies, what's the new job for the human investor? Does our role shift from picking the winners to, building and guiding the machines that do? Definitely something to think about.